Hey guys, Ravens here. I am fresh off my win of the AA1 Shadowverse tournament this Sunday. I went undefeated through the winners bracket and beat um, Sheep in the finals here. So yeah, you can see I 2-0'd Stoltz and then 2-0'd Sheep in the grand finals. So that's actually a lot of wins. Past 10 games are all wins. It's pretty good. You can see all those, pretty much all those games on Excelsior Vindy's Twitch, or he will post them on YouTube as well. So we're going to look at the deck list, and then I'm going to be playing some Control Blood to finish up my quests. So this is my favorite deck. Really like this deck. Just because it has so many complexities, ways to win, strategies for how to play the game. You know, if you don't totally brick, you're in every game. So 2 goblins, not 3, just because goblins a bad draw anytime after turn 1, basically. Sometimes on like 6 or 7 when you need a 1-cost card to play Tia, but you'll take any 1-cost card at that point. So, 2 goblins, 3 water fairies, 3 elf child maids. Yes, they're all foil. 3 guidance, 3 fairy circles, 3 roach, obviously the only real 2-drop. Sylvan Justice, Goblin Mage, 3 Ancient Elves. One change I made from last week to this week is to put in 2 Selwyn's Command, and these basically replaced Yule, and that has done very well for me. I ran Yule the first week because I was expecting a lot more aggro blood to be popular, just because it was such a popular deck on ladder. It's brainless. It can steal wins very easily with Urius, and if they get off to a fast start and they go first, it's almost impossible to win. But if they get off to a fast start, even Yule on 4 won't bring you back, because a lot of times it won't even clear their entire board, and then as long as they can Evo something on board to go face, or if they have like a Blood Wolf that they can evolve, you're kind of fucked. Or if they like don't trade and you're able to Ancient Elf. But regardless, so that's one of the changes we made. We swapped 2 Yules for 2 Selwyn's Command. And we dropped 1 Cynthia for a Tia. I believe I ran 2 Cynthias, 2 Tias. Tia's far more important than Cynthia. There was one point in the tournament where I had Cynthia, and she was by far the best card. Like, I had to play into an Aurelia, into Control Sword, and he played it, and Fina Evolve wouldn't have been enough to kill it. I had to have Cynthia Evolve. That was actually a very interesting game because Cynthia evolved, killed the Aurelia. That was turn 6. Turn 7, I Tia, and the Tia dies. Turn 8, I Fairy Tia, bounce the Tia with Nature's Guidance, and then I Tia again on 9. And basically, there are very few decks especially Control Sword, which relies on board control, and he wasn't running any Cyclone Blades. If they rely on board control, and I was going first side 2 evolves, then I played 3 consecutive Tias. And that's just too much for, almost any deck to handle. So I won that game handily. I mean, basically just running him out of cards. And then, I had the Roach combo to finish it just to make sure there was no, Bahamut comeback. 3 EPMs, obviously. 3 Finas. I think Fina is actually more important than EPM. Just because if you... Drawing Roach naturally is the bane of this deck because you draw so many Roaches from the 3 Goblin Mages and the 3 Finas. If you draw, even 1 can be really bad, but if you draw 2 Roaches naturally, you're in a lot of trouble. In general, if they're playing back at you, because those are basically dead draws. So, like I said, the 3 Finas, 2 Dance of Death. I think Dance of Death should be nerfed. I think it was a terrible card to print. It's practically a demonic strike added on to a execution, which was the neutral card. Every class has a 5 mana destroy card, and there's a reason Dance of Death is played in every single mid-range combo list. It's because that 2 face damage is more valuable than any other effect that's out there on those cards. Tia, I've already gone over, and 1 Cynthia. I couldn't really think of something to switch the Cynthia out for that I was really comfortable with. And having 1 in the deck, I really like, because it is really still a strong evolve. If you don't draw Finas, if you didn't draw second EPM, I always go first with this deck, just because I think I like it better. I mean, Daria is such a straightforward deck to play, for the most part. This deck involves just so much thinking, preparing, setting it up, trying to get them to play into your combo in terms of what you're holding. They know some of what you're holding in terms of how many EPMs did you evolve, how many Finas did you evolve, how many Goblin Mages did you play. So, your opponent has some idea of your hand and the amount of damage you can do. If they're also a Roach Forest player, or they've played the deck enough, they should have a real good idea of how much damage you can do. Also, sort of depending on whether or not you have a Nature's Guidance. But, they'll have a general idea of how that goes. And actually, there's this, in the Grand Finals, Onion Sheep, I think he incredibly misplayed in the first game. It's Forest versus Daria. I'm wrecking him turns 1 through 3, 4, and he's going first, and on turn 5, he just pulls the whole rune crap with Piercing Rune, Levi, the whole bit, dumps a bunch of creatures, has Daria in hand, but he doesn't clear. He does that on 5, and then on 6, instead of clearing, he goes face. And given the way I played, he should have cleared, because if he cleared, he won. And he also knows my deck list, so there's no excuse for not clearing. I think we'll go over that game just so we can see it again. So he ran Sheep anyway. We played the Grand Finals. He ran Seraph Haven and then Daria. And he played Daria both games. I really think he should have run Seraph, especially against my Daria. Like when I won with Forest, he's stuck with his Daria. I think he should have tried to catch the win with Haven so that it could be a 1-1 going into the final game. So this is the list I've stuck with on Daria. The only change from last week was I switched out Angelic Barrage for Demonic Strike. Again, I was teching against aggro blood, and most of the bloods are control. And Angelic Barrage, sorry, just doesn't do very much against Daria. It does a little bit against Forest, but Forest for against this deck, you just have to catch a great hand and flood them on 4, 5, and 6. 6 if you're going first, so that they don't get to their turn 7 where they're able to combo you down. And they have to use roaches defensively. Stuff like that. I like the 3 Blade Mages just because Blade Mage, it's a finisher. I could see switching 2 Blade Mages to 3 Emilus, but the thing is, later on in the game, you really want to have Blade Mage over Emilu, because you need to be pushing damage. Especially, I'm more worried about control decks. And the 3 Fates hand, so a lot of, most of the Darias I saw were not running any Fates hand. And personally, I think that's a mistake. I don't know if I need to be running 3. I might drop one of them. But, and the reason I think that's a mistake is, if you don't draw Daria in your top 10 cards, you have no sustain. If you don't draw Daria in your top 10 cards, and you weren't able to completely flood all your creatures on 4 or 5, well, then you've lost the game. Unless they're playing so slow that you're able to top deck a Daria and then get into the mayhem. But barring that, you're not able to do it. And in our Daria game, neither of us drew Daria until I drew one turn 7 or 8, but I played 2 Fates hands and he has none. And so, the casters are saying oh, and then Ravens draws the first Daria and then he wins. Well, sure, I drew the first Daria and I won, but if you looked at the board, I was going to win anyway, even if I didn't draw Daria. But I also drew 4 more cards than he did because I run Fate's hand and he doesn't. He's sitting there with Demonic Strikes oh, I have a lot of damage in my hand. I'm okay, but I'm at 18 health, so I'm just going to keep drawing and eventually I'll draw a Daria. And then you lose, which is basically what happened. So, like I said, the only change was Angelic Barrage for Demonic Strike. The only change I'm thinking of making is taking out, maybe 1 Fate's hand for maybe an Emilu, maybe even an Angelic Snipe, possibly a second Demonic Strike. I don't really like Demonic Strike just because it's so expensive. Angelic Snipe is good for bringing your Daria down so that you can Daria out as quickly as possible. Maybe a Kaleidoscope. I'm not entirely sure. But I do want to go back to this game. This was the first game of the Grand Finals, although I think it's gonna... Fuck. My tablet's been really weird with the replays. I think it's gonna, time out. We won't actually be able to see it.
Time for me to prove myself. I guess you're looking for a fight.
You see, I'm going second, which isn't terrible, although against Daria, it's kind of better to be going first because you get to turn 7 faster, and you kind of have to kill them on turn 7. just because they're so fast.
He's feeling hungry.
So we get a nice fast start here with Goblin. He top decked that insight. I think he had a magic missile, but he decided not to play it. He insighted instead. So we just fairy circle, fairy push in for damage. And yeah, I think he has the magic missile here. Yeah, he was holding the magic missile. He gets it on the fairy. But he can't play his Emilu yet, because I think he just drew it. I really like playing the Selwyn's command here, because he's not contesting my board, and he can't evolve here. And since he just played a magic missile, he probably doesn't have another one, and I know he doesn't run Angelic Snipe. And so that's why I play the 2-1 there. If his deck ran Angelic Snipes, I would probably play the Goblin Mage over the Selwyn's command, and that might have lost me the game if that were the case. So now we're able to just go ham, play the Goblin Mage, play a Water Fairy, and evolve the 2-1, because if we evolve the Goblin, it can be kaleidoscoped, and Levi Evolve can go right into a 3-4 very easily. Now Levi Evolve here, the Crimson Rune will kill the 4-3, but Piercing Rune doesn't. So I preferred this way, just because I get, I play around Kaleidoscope and Piercing Rune. And so we see he has Ogler and then double Piercing Rune. And then is able to trade into my 4-3 and play another Ogler and the Emilu. And then the last card in his hand is Daria. And so this is one of those situations where for me, I'm going, well, and then typical last words, as long as the last card in his hand isn't Daria. But I know now, after watching the video, that that last card in his hand is like a 4-cost Daria. So we look at this situation. He's at 11 health. We look at my hand. On turn 6, I'm going to have Fairy, Fairy, Roach, Roach. So 3, 4, and an Evolve. That's 9 damage. So I need to get him down to 9. I have the Water Fairy on board. The Water Fairy can't even trade. So I'm putting him to 10. Now, what that means is, okay, how do I not die? And hopefully he leaves me with a 1-1 on board. And so the only way that we do that and keep both roaches, because if we use a roach defensively here, we're fucked. Like, we will not be able to win. I mean, we could say Fairy Roach, Nature's Guidance Roach, but that's less damage than Fairy Fairy Roach Roach. Because that's 2, 4. This is 3, 4. So, top decking Tia was exactly what we needed, because now we play Tia, we evolve over the 5-2, because we see all the damage he has on board. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, with the evolve is 14. So he has lethal on board, and like I said, if that last card is Daria, he could have easily 4 more damage coming in. And that would mean 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Which, spoiler, is exactly what he has. He Darias. And now this, right here, should have maybe done it before that. When you look at this from his perspective, he knows, okay, I haven't evolved an EPM or a Fina. So I have no zero cost cards in my hand, right? So the best I can possibly do is Fairy Fairy Roach Roach Evolve, which is exactly 9 damage. And he even has like a piercing rune and shit in his hand, and instead chooses to go face. But if he was a Roach player, he would know, alright, the guy has no zero costs. Like, he can't beat me from 10. Like, he can't play. There's no combination of cards that I could possibly have in my hand that would give me the win. Like, the best I can do... Well, because he knows I don't run Angelic Snipe. If I ran Angelic Snipe, it could be snipe him down to 9, and then Fairy Roach Roach, and I would kill him. Right? But he knows I don't run Angelic Snipe. So, right here, he needs to be like, I think he has a Piercing Rune. Piercing Rune the Eve, value trade the Tia and the Water Fairy, swing for 5 plus the 2 from the Piercing Rune, puts me down to 6, leaves him with a 2-1, 2-1, 5-6, and Daria on board. And I think he even has still more damage in his hand. But instead, he goes face with everything, and actually, at the time, I was like, no fucking way did he draw both Piercing Runes, because he played one last turn, right? Yeah, so he Piercing Runed... Oh no, he... So that was all 3 Piercing Runes, actually. Shit, I didn't even realize that. Yeah, for some... Like, the way he played it, I thought for sure I was getting Piercing Runed here. But that was his 3rd Piercing Rune. And so I actually make... Well, it's sort of a mistake, but I had already calculated this in my head. That I need Fairy Fairy Roach Roach Evolve, deals 9 damage, and so I only need 1. But what I actually could have done 11 by swinging Tia, Nature's Guidancing Tia, playing the Fairy, playing Double Roach. But what I actually do is swing Tia, sack the Water Fairy, because I need 4 spots on board, Fairy, Water Fairy, Roach, Roach. And that gives me exact lethal. And the thing is, the casters didn't even realize this. Like, you know, I mean, they were kind of shocked when he didn't trade. But, they didn't say it right away, like, oh wow, that's a huge mistake, like, he has no zero costs, like, there's no way he can kill him. But, yeah, if he trades there, I lose. Like, I would have had to double Roach and Evo to kill the Ogler and Daria. Like, and I don't even know if I could have done that. So anyway, that was the first match, and then this is the I guess it's gonna let me show replays. This is the Daria match that I was talking about, where neither of us draws Daria. But since I run Fate's Hand and he runs Demonic Strike instead, I have a huge advantage where neither of us draws Daria, which is, you know, maybe a quarter of the time. Maybe less, I'm not sure. Always keep... I saw this guy throw away Insight. Always keep Insight in your opening hand. you have no turn 1 plays. And so all you're doing is throwing it away to get a card. So you might as well keep it and spell boost everything in your hand. Because that spell boost on Fate's hand matters a lot, because I'm going to play Fate's hand on turn 4. So you see, we Craig, even though I had nothing to Craig, you still play it. Because in Daria matchup, board is everything.
This time, baby.
And so here, since I have a Levi, I'm going to go ahead and Fate's Hand to get more cards, and then make the value trade.
Nothing.
Since I know next turn I can Levi Evolve, and then Crimson Sorcery, but since I Fate's Handed, I drew into Piercing Rune.